I always thought I had life figured out. Stability, success, and a clear plan, that's all I needed to build the future I wanted. Growing up, I saw the chaos that came from poor decisions, and I swore I'd never let that happen to me. My parents argued about money, my father struggled to hold down a steady job, and I remember lying awake at night, wishing for a life where everything made sense. So I built my beliefs like walls around me. The first brick was stability. If I had a steady income and a predictable life, nothing could go wrong. The second was control, never letting emotions cloud my judgment. And finally, the belief that love had to fit within the structure I'd created, like a perfect puzzle piece. Anything else, I thought, was bound to fail. When I met Mia, I thought she was that perfect piece. She had this energy, this passion for life, that made me feel alive in a way I hadn't before. But even then, I saw her as someone I needed to fit into my plan. I never considered that maybe she had a plan of her own, or that love wasn't about fitting, but about growing together. My dreams felt simple at the time. Build a career I could be proud of, achieve financial security, and find someone who would support me through it all. I dreamed of a life free from uncertainty, free from the fears that had haunted me as a child. But with those dreams came fears I never spoke aloud. What if I failed? What if I couldn't provide the life I promised? What if the person I loved couldn't accept me for who I was? And then there were my suspicions. I'd seen too many relationships fall apart, often over things that seemed small at first. I told myself it wouldn't happen to me, but deep down, I always wondered, what if love wasn't as strong as I believed? I carried the weight of these fears and suspicions like a shield. It protected me, but it also kept me from seeing the cracks in my own beliefs. I didn't realize it then, but the walls I'd built to keep my life under control were the very things keeping me from truly living it. I didn't expect to meet someone like Mia that night. To be honest, I wasn't even looking for someone, too focused on work, on my plans. I had my routine, my goals, and I didn't think anything could come along and change it. But then she walked into the cafe. She had this energy about her, like she was on the verge of something big, something exciting. Her smile was infectious, and when we started talking, it was like time slowed down. There was a spark, something I hadn't felt in years. She wasn't like anyone I'd ever met. She didn't just talk about the usual small stuff. Mia spoke of dreams, big ones. She talked about traveling the world, starting projects that mattered, and living a life full of experiences. Not just achievements. I remember looking at her, feeling a bit out of place, like I was from a different world. I was talking about promotions, stocks, and retirement plans, while she was talking about passion, freedom, and changing the world. For the first time in a long time, I felt alive, not because I had control, but because something was stirring in me. I saw in her eyes a whole other way of living, one that I couldn't ignore. But even then, I couldn't help but think, can someone like her really fit into my world? Still, as we continued talking, I felt that pull, that hope. Maybe I didn't have all the answers yet, but there was something in the way Mia talked about life that made me wonder if I'd been missing out. Maybe I'd been so focused on my beliefs, my need for stability, that I hadn't even considered that love, or life, could be something more than just what I thought it should be. As the weeks went by, I couldn't deny it anymore. I was falling for Mia. She was different, in all the best ways, and I found myself looking forward to every moment we spent together. But as much as I admired her, I started to feel the growing distance between us. Her dreams and mine didn't align, not even close. Mia was all about spontaneity, living for the moment, taking risks, and pushing boundaries. She was a writer with aspirations of publishing her first book, always talking about traveling to places I couldn't even pronounce. And then there was me, planning, budgeting, staying rooted in the familiar. I was focused on building a career, securing financial stability, and making sure everything in my life fit neatly into place. I had no room for the kind of unpredictability Mia craved. At first, I told myself it was just a phase, maybe I was overthinking it. But the more we talked about the future, the clearer it became that we were moving in different directions. Mia couldn't understand my obsession with security. She saw my routine as suffocating, a life lived in fear of failure rather than embracing it. To her, life wasn't about sticking to the plan, it was about diving in headfirst and seeing what happened. It made me question everything. Was I so committed to control that I couldn't let go, even for love? And was she so caught up in her dreams that she couldn't see how important my goals were to me? We tried to make it work. But the more we clashed, the more I realized that our paths weren't just different, they were incompatible. I couldn't stop thinking about what the future would look like. Would I be stuck forever in a cycle of working, providing, and planning while Mia chased her dreams without a second thought? Or could I let go of my need for control and join her in the uncertainty, knowing that it might cost me everything I believed in? The day we decided to break up is one I'll never forget. We sat down in that small cafe, our usual spot, and I could see the sadness in Mia's eyes before she even said anything. It wasn't sudden, I could feel the tension building for weeks. But hearing her say the words, "Maybe it's time we go our separate ways," cut deeper than anything I'd expected. I could tell Mia had been thinking about it for a while. Her voice wavered as she spoke, and I saw the pain in her face, but there was also a quiet resolve. She wasn't angry. She wasn't disappointed. She was just tired. Tired of fighting for a future that didn't seem possible. I, on the other hand, was trying to hold on to something that was slipping through my fingers. I wanted to keep us together, but I couldn't ignore the reality of our differences anymore. As much as I loved Mia, and I truly did, I couldn't see how we could both live the life we wanted if we stayed together. She wanted to be free, to chase her dreams without looking back, while I couldn't live without a stable foundation beneath me. In that moment, it was clear, if I stayed with Mia, I would have to give up everything I'd worked for. The career, the stability, the predictable future, all of it would need to be sacrificed. And if Mia stayed with me, she'd have to give up her dreams. Neither of us was willing to make that choice. The hardest part wasn't saying goodbye. It was realizing that sometimes love isn't enough to keep two people together when their lives are headed in different directions. The love we shared was real, but it was clear that our dreams weren't meant to align. I walked away from that breakup with a heavy heart, knowing that I had made the right choice, at least for my future. But even then, deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Something important that I hadn't figured out yet. The months after the breakup felt like a blur. I threw myself into work, just as I always had, convincing myself that I was doing the right thing. Mia and I hadn't spoken much, just a few brief texts to check in, but that was it. It was the space I needed to figure out my life, or so I told myself. I focused on growing my business, climbing the corporate ladder, and accumulating wealth. I told myself I was finally doing what was necessary to secure the future I always dreamed of. But even as I moved on, something inside me was missing. I kept pushing it down, burying it under more work, more meetings, more success, but it didn't go away. There was a hollow feeling in the pit of my stomach, like I was running on autopilot. I had the stability I thought I wanted, but at what cost? I still thought about Mia, about her wild ideas, her carefree spirit. I remembered the way she used to laugh when she talked about her next adventure, the way she would talk about writing her book, about seeing the world. I realized that in my pursuit of stability, I had lost the very thing that once made me feel alive, passion. I'd convinced myself that breaking up with Mia was the right decision. After all, we were too different. She wasn't willing to sacrifice her dreams, and I wasn't willing to let go of my control. But as time went on, I couldn't ignore the nagging thought that maybe I'd made the wrong choice. I had stability, but I didn't have love. I had success, but it felt empty. I started to wonder, was I truly happy? Or was I just pretending to be because it was what I thought I needed? I spent so many years building walls around my life that I forgot to ask myself if I was really living. It was a Thursday morning when I ran into Mia again. It wasn't planned, of course. Life has a funny way of throwing the unexpected at you when you least expect it. I was sitting in the corner of a local bookstore, flipping through a business magazine, when I heard that familiar voice. "Is this seat taken?" I looked up, and there she was, Mia, looking just as I remembered, with that same spark in her eyes. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Time seemed to stop as I realized that this wasn't just some coincidence. She'd moved on, too. Or at least, that's what I told myself. But seeing her here, in this small corner of the world, felt like the universe was reminding me that nothing is ever truly final. She smiled when she saw me, and I tried to play it cool, but my heart was racing. We exchanged pleasantries, but there was a moment of quiet before we both started talking at once. We laughed awkwardly, trying to make sense of the time that had passed, but it didn't take long before we fell into that familiar rhythm. Mia told me she'd been traveling, living in different cities, chasing her dreams, and working on her book. She had that same energy, the one that had once felt so foreign to me. And yet, as she spoke, I realized something had shifted in me. I didn't feel the resistance I had before. The part of me that feared change, that feared losing control, was quieter now. I had learned a lot in the months since we'd parted ways. I had discovered that I didn't need to control everything to be happy. I'd learned that love and freedom could coexist, that pursuing your passions didn't have to mean giving up on your responsibilities. As we talked, I saw that the connection we once had was still there. Not in the way it had been before, but in a new form, one shaped by the lessons we had both learned since we parted ways. There was no need for control, no need for sacrifice. What I felt now wasn't the desperation to cling to something, but the quiet confidence that we could both live our lives, following our own paths, and still find a way to be in each other's world. As the days passed after our unexpected reunion, I found myself thinking more and more about Mia. We had started meeting for coffee, then dinner, and slowly, the walls I had so carefully built around my emotions began to crumble. But this time, something was different. We weren't just rekindling old feelings, we were building something new, something stronger, healthier, and more balanced than what we'd had before. Mia and I had both changed. The person I was when we first met was long gone, caught up in the pursuit of perfection and control. And the Mia I had known back then had evolved too, her dreams no longer just lofty ideas but tangible realities she was making happen. But now, we understood each other in a way we hadn't before. We talked about everything, what had happened in the months we were apart, the lessons we had learned, and most importantly, how we had grown. For the first time, I understood her desire for adventure, not as something reckless, but as something necessary for her happiness. She, in turn, understood why I needed stability, why I had always been so focused on the future. There was no judgment now, just an understanding that we both wanted the same thing, a life filled with meaning, but also balance. I realized that love, real love, doesn't ask you to give up who you are for the sake of the other person. It doesn't demand sacrifice for sacrifice's sake. What it asks is for each of you to be fully yourselves while supporting the other's growth. It asks for compromise, but not at the expense of your individual dreams. We began to make plans, not just for the future, but for how we would navigate our differences. I wouldn't give up my need for stability, but I could learn to embrace some uncertainty. She wouldn't give up her dreams, but she could work with me to build a foundation we both felt secure on. We didn't have to change each other, we just needed to meet in the middle. As we moved forward, something remarkable happened. We started living the life we had always dreamed of, but this time, together. There was no more tension between love and freedom. The boundaries we had set for ourselves, those lines that once seemed so rigid and unmovable, became more like guidelines. We both adapted, we both grew, and most importantly, we both remained true to ourselves. Mia and I had always been different, but that wasn't something that had to pull us apart anymore. It was what made our connection stronger. I learned to embrace her spontaneity, her desire to explore new places, to dive headfirst into new experiences. And in turn, Mia started to understand that stability wasn't something that constrained me, but something I needed to feel secure in our future. We traveled together, though not in the reckless, aimless way Mia had envisioned. Instead, we found a balance, planning trips that allowed her to explore new cultures and ideas, but always ensuring there was time for us to come back home, recharge, and take care of the life we had built. We found the perfect rhythm, one where both our needs were met. And the love we had for each other grew deeper with each passing day. For the first time, I realized that love didn't mean compromising who you were. It meant finding someone who could meet you where you were, without demanding you change. It meant learning how to grow together while staying true to the individual parts of yourself that made you unique. We had learned the hard way that love doesn't always look like what you expect it to. It's not always about grand gestures or passionate declarations. Sometimes, it's the quiet moments when you realize that the person you once thought was your opposite is the one who helps you become your best self. This was our new beginning, not a fairy tale with perfect endings, but a real, imperfect, beautiful life built on trust, understanding, and shared dreams. As the months turned into years, I found myself reflecting on everything that had led me to this moment, this new chapter with Mia. Looking back, I realized how much I had changed, how much we had both changed. The lessons we had learned, the mistakes we had made, and the time we had spent apart, it all came together in a way that made sense, a way that made me appreciate everything about our relationship in a way I never had before. I had spent so many years chasing success, thinking that it would bring me the happiness I craved. But what I learned was that success without love is just a hollow victory. Money, power, status, they were important, yes, but they couldn't fill the emptiness inside me. I needed connection, real connection, with someone who understood me and shared my vision for the future. Mia had taught me that love isn't about control or sacrifice, it's about growth and understanding. It's about letting go of the fear that if you don't have everything perfectly in place, you'll lose the person you love. It's about trusting that, if it's meant to be, the love you share will adapt and evolve with you, rather than staying stuck in the past. And now, as I looked at Mia, I realized I had found something rare, something real. We had both come full circle. We had figured out how to make our dreams coexist without suffocating each other. We had learned how to nurture the individual parts of ourselves while coming together to create something far more beautiful than I could have imagined. I realize now that love isn't a destination, but a journey. It's not about finding someone who completes you, it's about finding someone who supports you while you become the best version of yourself. The love we shared wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about ticking all the boxes or meeting all the expectations. It was about accepting each other's flaws, learning from our mistakes, and building a future that honored both of our dreams. As we stood there, looking forward to a life that we would continue to build together, I finally understood, love isn't about holding on tightly to what you have, but about knowing when to let go of fear and trust in the person you're with. It's about knowing that, no matter the obstacles, you're willing to face them together.